Now, as we get started, one thing you got to know, in order to be as successful as Chris was, she comes from a really special school, from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. And I say that tongue-in-cheek because that's my alma mater also. So Chris, I believe you're our largest resale partner.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about CDW's partnership with IBM and why it's so important to your company and your clients?
Sure, thanks for the question, and thanks for inviting me to be here with you today. Arvind and I also both worked at IBM. Well, obviously, he still works there. I started at IBM in '89, and Arvind started in 1990. So we didn't end up in the same place, but we started somewhat in the same place. So, in terms of how we think about IBM as a partner, it's really, if I think about it on two dimensions. The first is technology. And the second is really how IBM conducts their business. So certainly as we look to provide full stack solutions to our customers, IBM's technology across infrastructure, AI, software, data, analytics, hybrid cloud, all very critical to the full stack solution we're providing to customers. And then on the relationship side, we have very similar approaches to the business. You know, we have the CDW way. IBM has its basic beliefs, all grounded in trust and integrity. So we just find IBM a really great partner to work with. I appreciate the partnership.
That's good to hear. And I'm hoping that we'll keep doing even more together.
Yeah. And one of the other things we like about IBM is always listening to what the partner is looking for. So I think the recent Partner Plus changes are a big part of that. I know that we're really excited about the focus on skills and enablement and how IBM is sharing your assets on our behalf so that we can leverage your great training. I'm just curious if, a few months in, how you're feeling about it.
Look, I think Partner Plus, if I was to just step back and look at it, is the single largest change we have made to our partner program in my memory. I mean, Chris mentioned 1990, so that's 33 years almost and counting. It's the single largest change. But the change is driven really by an objective. The objective is to give all of you more access, more benefits, a clearer view on all the incentives, and all of the expertise that we can bring. So how do we begin to go do that? You have our commitment that when we say support, we really mean that all of the training we do for our people, that we bring that to you. In terms of transparency around tooling and pricing, I believe even CDW built a couple of microsites on pricing using that. Those are examples of what we could do together. You have our commitment. I think you've heard Kate talk about, can we reduce the amount of overhead, the amount of administration? I'll use that word to be straightforward, that you all have to do to deal with IBM. So as opposed to having 30 different or 40 different programs and knowing how to administer each one and knowing what data, what documentation, what registration you need for each of those, we want to dramatically simplify all those things so that it becomes a lot easier. So we are the easiest partner for you all to work with. How do you get access to skills? That is the part of the technical skilling that we talked about. We want to bring our material there. By the way, if you need help when you're getting going, before you're fully up to speed, we want to say, look, you can do that. That's part of our commitment that we doubled both the number of sales and, more importantly, the number of technical sales, client engineering people who can work with all of you to bring these capabilities to our clients. That's part of the commitment. So you're going to see that as we begin to go forward, all of this goes in lockstep. You say, kind of, where are we? And to me, Chris, it's maybe a 2-year journey, not just last 4 months. And if I look upon that, we were maybe 15% of our revenue was associated with the ecosystem. It's now up to about 40%. By the way, that's more than just technology. Even in our consulting business, a lot of it is with the ecosystem. Partnerships we have built up, be it Microsoft, be it AWS, be it Samsung, be it Salesforce, are in addition to what we want to do with the resellers, as well as the distributors, as well as the system integration and consulting partners. So I bring that all together. So I say, good first step from 15 to 40, but I think we are at half the absolute that we should be. So I'll set a big goal out there. If I look at the next 3 to 5 years, I'd like us to double in aggregate together, and we are willing to keep investing to do that. Our hope is that you want to come along with us and be our trusted partner to bring all this to our clients as we go down this path.
That's right. I think that sounds like a great goal.
So if I sort of build up on your first answer, Chris, I'd say CDW's success has at least partly been credited to a strong product mix. If I think about that, can you talk more about this in terms of where the industry is growing and where you expect to go along these paths?
Sure. I mean, I think generally, IBM and partners are looking to drive outcomes for customers and help them achieve their business goals. So for us, that means we want to be the single source and the destination for them, regardless of how they want to consume technology, where they want to consume it, when they want to consume it. So for us, that means we want to have a full stack portfolio. Some of that we've developed organically, some of it we've developed through acquisition, so that when our customers come to us, as we say, we can say yes more often with confidence, and obviously partnering with IBM lets us do that in a number of technology stacks.
Okay. So I think that speaks to what I think of as the trend in the industry. So clients are looking for more of a, not quite a full one-stop shop, but more of a solution purchase, if I was to channel you right?
Yeah, it's more, we want them to bring us their problems, not just sort of the parts that they need, so that we can help them. So
that's good to hear. Yeah. And I think that we certainly hope in our parts that we can give you more and more also of those solutions that solve the client problems as we go down the.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think everything's become more complex. You'd think technology would be getting easier, but in a way it's more complex. Customers have to manage across different technology stacks, across multiple clouds, across different consumption models and provisioning, so they do really need strong partners to help them.
I completely agree. The world's becoming more hybrid.
Yeah, absolutely, in a lot of ways. So you obviously have a great view of what's going on in the economy. Which is be interested for all the partners in the room about how you view the macro growth prospects, the role technology is going to play. Just give us your overall view with everything that you see.
I'll go tongue in cheek. I wish the world would stop changing so quickly. Yeah. We thought there was the pandemic, then there was a war, then there was geopolitics, then there's inflation, then there's interest rates. But to sort of just step back from there a little bit. First, despite all that, I'm incredibly optimistic about our aggregate prospects for all of us. So let me sort of break that down, and why do I say that? So, and I'll come back to some of the challenges that are there, because I don't want to be blind to it. There are challenges. But if I look at, when I talk to government leaders, whether I think about the UK or France or Germany or Spain or India or Japan or Australia or the UAE or Saudi Arabia, or all of the United States or Canada, they all come down to technology is becoming more and more important. I think that the place where you would say 50 or 70 years ago, everybody debated kind of where is the money and how can I control my financial system, and sort of banks occupied a critical place and everybody wanted their own central bank and their own currency. Technology has become almost equal to that in importance. So when I say that, now you think about it, that means for most of our clients, the only way they can scale, the only way they can look at taking cost out is through technology. That means technology is no longer a little cost center. It is the thing that lets our clients succeed. So then you say, all the challenges are mentioned. Is there inflation? How do you tackle inflation? The only way to tackle inflation for a client is if they can make their existing people and assets more productive. Well, what's going to make them more productive? It's only through technology. It's only through really leveraging data. It's by leveraging straight-through processing. It's by taking out overhead that they are going to become more productive. In the face of interest rates, how do you begin to do it? That means you need to have less capital expenditures, and that means back to you need to be more productive. There is labor challenges. How do you worry about operating where it's hard to find all of the skills? Technology is again the answer. Whether you think about now supply chain, you think about resilience of that, you think about cyber, technology is becoming more and more the answer to all of these issues. So I sort of come back from there and say, okay, big macro trend, and this really, I mean, if you want to channel, goes all the way back to the beginnings of the Industrial Revolution or to modern economics with Adam Smith and David Ricardo that really technology, because they would use the word capital, but it was really not capital as in money. It was really capital for buying tools of production, which I'll say AKA is technology, is the way that we sort of make progress and we make everybody more productive, and that leads to a rising tide. And that's what everyone wants. That's what companies want, that's what governments want, and that's why, sorry, really long answer, but that's what I tap into. Why? And I think to net it out, technology will remain 3 to 4%, maybe 5% higher growth rates than GDPs. And so if you look at it, the IMF says 2.5% GDP growth this year for the world, and then you say 3 to 5 means 5.5 for technology globally. And even if you look at the US, where you say, is it 0, is it +1? I think right now we're sitting at +1 GDP growth for the year in real terms. That means go 3 points above, so 4% for technology. And so that's why I'm optimistic about what can be done and why technology is the answer, not one of the answers. I think it's actually the only answer to how we're going to go make progress in the face of all these things.
Yeah, I agree. There's never been a better time to be in technology, right?
Yes.
There's nothing anyone can do that doesn't end up there. So you talk about efficiencies. One of the ways that companies will become more efficient is through the use of artificial intelligence. One could argue that IBM was way ahead in that game with Deep Blue or with Watson. Obviously, it's now all the rage with ChatGPT. So just curious in terms of how you think of that. You guys were obviously well ahead in terms of thinking about artificial intelligence, and now it seems like it's come to the common person in terms of that.
Oh yeah, look, I'm happy to talk about this because I'll say this is an area where we have made a lot of advances, and we also have every scar on our back from things that didn't turn out so well. So did we make the correct observation now 11 years back in 2012 that artificial intelligence will fundamentally change how enterprises do work? Absolutely. We made that observation based on a bunch of work that had been done. I mean, you mentioned Deep Blue and Jeopardy and deep learning and a bunch of other things. Where we went off, going 10 years back, was we thought that people will not have the appetite to want to learn the innards of these technologies, and they will want to consume full-fledged black box monolithic applications. That was an incorrect conclusion from the right observation. So we kind of spent 4 or 5 years going down the path, let's make big black box systems, and then clients will want to deploy them. That was wrong. So now you kind of get a chance, and as you look at it, then you say, well, okay, shall we go to clients with deep learning? Problem in deep learning is you got to take a lot of data, you got to label a lot of data, you got to take some really expert people. You can go create one model. That, if it's a very big conclusion and a very big opportunity, maybe, is worth it. So now we get a chance with what is being called generative AI, which is really based on a pretty foundational technology called large language models, to reset that thinking. So now you say, look, the ability to do AI comes down in cost massively. The first model is more expensive, but you can bootstrap that from work we do or open source does. But the next iteration is maybe a weekend of work. And it doesn't require such expert people. And it doesn't require labeled data. Now you can do one foundation model, and if that's roughly correct for you, you can do the next 100 tasks with it, really with just a weekend of work. That means you're sitting at 1% of the prior cost of deploying an AI model. That is a massive advantage. And sort of people get into, is this a refinement or is this revolutionary? Usually when something is 100 times better, I'd say it's pretty close to revolutionary, not just a refinement.
Yeah, right.
Even though I'll agree at a strict, if I go back to my computer science roots, that's a refinement. But 100 times better, I assert, is revolutionary. And sort of that's where we are now.
And so what do you think about all the talk about the ethics related to AI and how that will evolve?
Look, I think that you got to be careful on what is it completely autonomous that you're going to let these systems go, or are they under human watch and control? So if it's completely autonomous, I really am hesitant about systems that just go with no control, and somebody may take their advice and go do something. That is for completely wide open systems. I think one has to be careful. You hear all the words, hallucination, fiction, making up an answer, getting really persuasive. Yeah, okay, because that's what they're trained to do. They're not trained to not give you an answer. They're not trained to say, I'm completely unsure, but here's the advice I give you. Right? I mean, I don't think they begin with saying that.
Right.
So I think, but if you constrain them, then actually I'm pretty comfortable about where they can go. By constraining, I mean, you really want the answer to come from this curated set of documents. Then your confidence in what they can do goes way up. I think that that is where they're really good. Two, I would use them for customer care. I would use them for things. Would I really use them for autonomous use of heavy machinery, like completely in the open? Maybe not. Inside, a port or a shipping yard or a mine where you can define paths and you can have operators watching, yes. So I think you have to be careful. If the consequence is massive, I would be a little cautious. If it's within constraints, I think I'm pretty good. That's where I'd be today on the ethics. And you do have to watch. I think the other issue that's going to come up in the medium term is going to be around what is the data that was used to train them? Meaning, did you really have fair access and fair rights to all of that? And that's going to come in more and more, which is why we talk about data sheets and fact sheets about explaining what is the data. This will come up in the next few years, guaranteed. I already hear artists and musicians are complaining, is maybe the wrong word, are correctly concerned maybe about how it's being used.
Yeah, I think it was part of the writer's strike that's going on right now. So, okay, great, well, thanks. Well, we did have some questions from all of you that we received before we came on stage today, so I'm going to turn to those, if that's okay. The first one from the audience was, how do you think of the role or focus of the business partner over the course of the next 5 years, and do you envision the focus shifting at all for partners?
So Chris, I almost will go back to what you talked about. Clients are looking at you for more of a solution. So if I think about, as we begin, and it's going to be slow, so don't please take this to be that it's going to be a step function and it's all over. But if I look at what clients want, clients leverage all of you for helping them solve the problem. So it used to be around, can you bring me access to technology? Can you bring me access to something? Can you come in and help install it? I think many of those things are going to become so much easier that the value on those parts is going to decrease. Not go away, but is going to decrease. But then they'll get to, but how do I use it? How do I integrate with other things? How do I use it in the context of my internal business process or application? That means that your role is going to become much more towards helping them solve problems. It's going to be in many more cases about giving them access to a solution. It's going to be about understanding their business and understanding what their gaps are. And so that's going to be the change. That is why we are committed to helping you build skills, but those skills are going to turn into much more around constructing solutions. Look, at the end of the day, clients may use a lot of stuff that they will call is a commodity or is, for them, a utility. Like check processing in banks is now a utility. Very few people will do it for themselves. I think email is practically a utility. Nobody does bespoke email systems anymore, whereas 15 years ago they did. I think now it'll turn into, what is my supply chain? How do I do my CPQ, configure, price, quote? Because those are things that could be unique to a given client. That means you will need skills around those things. How do I construct my model based on my industry and my regulations for taking my data to do customer care? So that's where your skills will go. Hopefully, many of you will depend upon us to provide you some of the raw technology capabilities. Many of you will push us, I hope, to say, you need to teach me how to do this really quickly in the context of a client. But that's when our commitment comes in.
Okay, great. And that's sort of linked to this next question, is about IBM capabilities embedded into partner solutions. I know you had a big announcement with SAP last week, which is sort of along those lines. So this question is, what steps is IBM taking to celebrate the power of two organizations coming together to deliver competitive solutions in the market?
Right. So look, I mean, so SAP was unique because this was the first time that SAP embedded AI from somebody else, but we were really happy that they picked our Watson platform, and this is around it using our AI capabilities for SAP Start, which is a launch point for the cloud solutions, But as you think about it, you can go down the path of you begin natural languages, so you type in your question as opposed to have to understand all the intricacies that you normally must. And really, it's not unique to SAP. For almost any enterprise, large application, you have to understand the unique jargon. So can you step back from that and get to natural languages? But you want to get to the point of being able to say, show me all purchase orders between maybe IBM and CDW, as opposed to have to know the customer number and know the date and know the exact part that's being looked for, et cetera. And so as you begin to think about that, or as you can begin to look at, if I think about their expense and travel systems, show me all travel to a certain site, those are things that you can begin to do. So we're really excited about it. But remember, it may or may not be obvious to an end user that it's IBM Inside. So it could be completely white labeled. So a big part of our goals there is to say that we want to embed our capabilities so that the life of the end user of our partner becomes easier. And that's sort of what we want to go down the path of. And sometimes you'll get credit that is explicit, sometimes not. But in all cases, people know. But when you think about that and you think about the depth of the engineering relationship between the two sides, that is something we are quite open to. By the way, that's not the only example. I can think of what we're doing with Samsung and Red Hat. I can think of what we're doing with Adobe and OpenShift. So there's a few more like that that are there in terms of the things that we are doing together.
Okay, that's great. All right, next question from the audience. Certainly development of skills is a hallmark of the partner program. I know I've heard you say you think continuous learning is one of the top 3 things that people should focus on. What areas do you think a partner should prioritize in terms of skills development to make the greatest impact, both in the near term and in the long term?
Look, I mean, why I say continuous learning is important. It used to be 30, 40 years ago, even when I came out of college in the late 80s, people would say, well, you learn these skills in college and then you're going to go apply them for the next 30 years. People would come out and say, you know, you're coming out as a signal processing person, or you're coming out as an accountant, you're going to go do that. I'd say in 30 years, the world has changed. Yep. The half-life of skills is now, you can debate. People say 7 years. I'm a little skeptical that it's even as much as 7 years. I think it's less than that. I mean, if I think of the way that some of my friends from grad school used to design chips, it's completely different today. And so if you think about this, then the half-life is going to change. So that for half-life, let's accept the 7 years, is going to be there. Then you say, what are the skills for partners? From our perspective, I would go to the 2 that we talk about the most, hybrid cloud and artificial intelligence. Hybrid cloud, to the point Chris also made, look, our clients are all going to use multiple public clouds. They still have, many of them have some on-premise infrastructure. Some have private clouds. How do you help them manage across that multitude of environments? How do they optimize cost? How do they pick where something should be deployed? How do they have flexibility of where they might redeploy it later? How do you pick skills around all those? I would also tell you straightforwardly, I think the world of virtualization is going to move to the world of containers. Again, not instantly, but it is. So are your skills on containers as strong as they are on virtualization? Do you understand the jargon that your clients might be using there? Because it's no longer true that we know collectively more than our clients. Often clients have already experimented. They have a sense of where they want to go. So we have to be there. It's really not great if the client knows a lot more about something than we do when we walk in. So you got to learn that. The other side of it is going to be around leveraging artificial intelligence. So when we talk about these new words, foundation models, large language models, have we experimented upon them? Have you begun to use them inside yourself? Because that is the most, to me, the most powerful way of telling somebody that you're an expert, right? Well, we already use it inside because our people do it, and so we go forward. So I think that those are techniques. Other areas are going to be really important. Cyber is an area where I think the spend is only going to increase. So one should develop more and more capability around cyber. And then lastly, around not just these 3, but getting into how you really begin to unlock the value of data for an enterprise is a big topic. And some are clearly very, very good at it, and most are not. I mean, data still lies in silos. It's not cleaned up. So these are all areas where I think there's a lot of opportunity for all of you.
Great, thank you. So shifting gears a little bit, there was a question on sustainability. Your report was out recently, and if you haven't read it, it's actually a really interesting read. You guys are doing such great things. Obviously, you place a premium on that as a company, which is terrific. There's a question about how you view the role of a smaller potential partner and how they get some similar impact without the ability to maybe invest in the same way that IBM does, or obviously they don't have as big of a footprint. Any ideas or advice for smaller partners on how they can drive a similar sort of ESG agenda?
Yeah, look, so our report was called IBM Impact. It's on our website, so anybody who feels like going to read it can go read it. We use the word impact because it's about making an impact. We did have a pretty explicit goal in one of the three. In the others, I would call it more about making progress. So it's about ethics, it's about equity, and equity is more about taking care to make sure you're an inclusive environment where, regardless of ethnic background, gender, and so on, you're an environment which is welcoming to everybody as long as they have the skills. And the last part is about the environment. Look, on environment, we leaned in and we said that we are going to be net zero without offsets by 2030, not 2050.
That's great.
Would I expect all of you to be so forward-leaning? No. Would I expect that you're trying to make progress on your own environmental impact? Absolutely. So would I urge that you have goals? But this is where people get concerned, because you said, well, maybe not everybody has the same resources.
Right.
I actually go to, but I think in this case, profit and purpose go together. Would we all agree that energy costs are going up?
Yes.
I think short term, you get blips up and down, but if I look at the trend, it's up. So maybe this is a place where we want to say that this is where the two goals align, that if we begin to use a bit less energy, I would tell you all, my personal view, 30% of energy used is completely and utterly wasted. So 30% I think you can all get by just getting more efficient, and that goes straight towards your own bottom line. Okay, so I just begin with that simply. Asking you all to focus on scope 3, meaning the downstream impact of the work you do after it's deployed, I don't know the world knows how to measure it.
Yep.
So some of you are very large, so not all of you, but some of you. Yeah, maybe you should start working on it, as should we. Do we all have any idea? I think it's completely ludicrous right now, even though people say, do scope 3, and I say like, okay, really, how?
Right.
I mean, it's not really possible. On the other two, I would ask that you make progress, but asking and holding you, especially if you're maybe a couple of hundred people, I mean, like, you can't really be, you should be an inclusive environment, but asking you to go measure, well, we're 31.6% something is, I don't think, appropriate. But I think you'll find that your clients may often lean in and say, we want to know that you are indeed making progress there. So it's again a business advantage for you. So I think wherever those align is where I would ask you to go. And that's kind of where we go. By the way, we do have some commitments. We have commitments on our supply chain side, not so much partners only, to advantage in some cases, if it's in the US, to black-owned businesses. We definitely would like to see more diversity on gender amongst the owners of our suppliers and partners, et cetera. So those are things that we will do, but we don't put that back as a hard requirement on all of you, except to ask, please be inclusive, please make progress on the equitable side. And I would tell you that if you aren't paying attention to environment, it's okay, I guess you want to make less profit.
Yeah. Well, thanks. IBM's always been a leader in that way, so we appreciate it. And if wasting energy, if my teenagers are any test of that, 30% is probably a low number. So we have some more pre-submitted questions, but I know you had an appetite to open it up to the audience, so I think we have some mics in the audience. If there's any questions that anybody wants to ask in addition to our little fireside chat here.
Hey, Arvind, Phil Godwin from Clear Technologies. You know, Rob Thomas talked a lot about the 100,000 new clients over the next couple of years. Take me through your thoughts on that and how you see partners playing and the interaction there.
Okay, thank you. Look, product-led growth, which is what leads to the 100,000 new clients. If I look at it, we have 2,000, maybe 3,000 clients at the most where IBM will directly touch the clients. Even within that, only about 500 that we are very, I'll call it high touch with, right? After that, there is a partner involvement. So we are pretty committed that we want to reach this with our partners, not by ourselves. So if I think about I want to reach 100,000 new clients, that's a massive opportunity. Now you'll say, why did you pick 100,000? I actually don't want to stop at 100,000. I know Rob will like squirm when I say that, but I think if I counted right, there's 30 million registered enterprises globally. I think there's 6 million plus in the United States. Not that I'm numerical, but I can't help but remember these numbers. So you say, how far can we go? Then you begin to say, you do a cutoff somewhere at some number, right? Let's suppose you want to do a cutoff at people with 100 million in revenue or thereabouts. So you reach a certain number of enterprises globally. And then you say, we think that we have aspects of our technologies that are actually going to bring a lot of value to them. Is it everything? No. I mean, like for me to be a little cynical, maybe the small pizza shop with 100 franchisees is not so interested in deploying TPF for reservations because they aren't so much worrying about is the given pizza oversold to lots of people with overbooking. But maybe they want to have more AI to take orders so their workers can be freed up to serve pizzas and maybe also do other snacks so they can raise their overall revenue. That might make sense. Or if somebody's got 30% churn, maybe they want to leverage technologies that help them hire people and onboard people more quickly as opposed to having a lot of people in the back office doing that. So we think that there's about, right now we think of 15 odd things that could be relevant to this very long tail. And I don't say that that's the only set, but I do think that those should be more hardened, those should be much more easy to deploy, those you should be able to bring in. We have to be committed that it's easy to try them, it's straightforward and transparent pricing, you have all of the value material you need to go get there. So that's out of our side. So hopefully you hear from me. By the way, I don't know whether Rob mentioned to you, when we look at the opportunity there, it's in the multiple billions. We kind of added up to, we think it's 5 growing to 25 billion in that tail that is not where we are focused today, but we need to. And for IBM, it's maybe a bit of back to the future. If I think about the PC company, which was 1984, if I remember that famous Super Bowl ad, I mean, for the 20 years that was there, that was very successful. If I think about now the I-Series, or what used to be the AS400, that went out to 30 or 40,000 clients. Mm-hmm. So I think a little bit of this is kind of back to the future, but it needs to be a more packaged answer from us, if that answers your question.
Right, one of the big things I always hear about the struggles is around data strategy. We have so many tools out there, but the biggest concerns is around how we integrate all that together, especially in the complexity of a regulatory environment.
Look, I think data is one of these unsolved problems that then also has a lot of opportunity. So if I take it from the following lenses, part of it is cultural. Every single major process in an enterprise kind of wants to hold on to the data. Mm-hmm. And then they insist on their own data standards. Sometimes it is their own data standard, sometimes it's a standard driven by an underlying application. So the finance team has theirs, the marketing team has theirs, the customer care team has theirs, the product teams has theirs, the online team or the .com team came up with their own. And you can go on, and you soon have 100 different silos. So one question is, how do you begin to integrate? Because without that, it's very hard to get a cross view of what may be happening with a client or a supplier, or even with your own employees. Now, you say, what is the impetus? Why would somebody want to do this? I think that with the mixture of the demographic issue, where labor is very expensive, and the ability to leverage AI to help take cost out, now suddenly there is a huge reason to want to go down this. But I also think that us providers of data have to make it easier. Coming in and saying, you must give us your 11,000 element data model, and then everything must fit into that, and so go do the 1,500 people worth of cleansing to put it in. I think that that is too high a burden. So I think we need to have technologies that can ingest more data, partially clean, somewhat clean, but not fully clean, and be able to put it all in and be able to very quickly digest it for some purposes. So I think it's a mixture of maybe meeting between the two, somewhat, but then leverage AI to do a lot of the tasks which used to be so manual. And that's part of what we are wanting to do with our watsonx.data platform. And hopefully, as many of you get your hands on it over the next few months, you'll give us feedback. Is it at least getting halfway there towards these problems?
Yeah, you mentioned data. Obviously, it's going to be a company asset. When you think about the storage of that data, where do you think we are in terms of our current security posture, and how good are our current encryption schemes?
If quantum computing was never to exist, today's encryption schemes are perfect. I very much doubt that classical computers are going to break today's encryption of 2,000-bit keys, AES, or even others that easily. Now, I'm a believer that quantum is going to come. We can debate, is it 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, but likely in this decade. So stuff that you have encrypted and stored will get broken. So a lot of stuff is ephemeral. You may not care. If it's going to get broken 5 years from now, who cares? But if it contains some of your confidential client contracts, pricing, some other stuff, you might care a lot.
Yeah.
So I think we've got to get ready for the post-quantum era. So I would get really careful, especially about data stored in public, using today's schemes until you get to leverage post-quantum. Good news, post-quantum schemes are not more complicated than today's encryption schemes. That's the good news. The bad news, very few people are offering them. So you got to begin to get into how do you introduce them. And I think that's, by the way, a massive opportunity for all of you to go into your clients. We commit to give you the technology. How do you figure out where it is? How do you replace it? How do you insert it? How do you take care of these new keys? And I think that's a massive opportunity for all of you. Almost think of replacing encryption, not quite in the same category, but like a Y2K problem. Go into every application and say, I need to replace your current encryption schemes with the post-quantum ones. And for those with sensitive data, that's a pretty important problem.
Yeah, big opportunity potentially.
Yeah.
Okay. Another question?
Good morning. I'm Zia Yusuf from VMware. A question around hybrid computing, and as you talked about private cloud and on-premise and public, are CIOs today thinking about those choices properly? Yes, there's cost. Is there time to impact innovation? Would you suggest a different way of thinking about those choices than the norm of what is done today?
Yeah, Zia, good to see you here. Look, I think that there is intentional versus accidental hybrid. I'll use kind of those words. So I think today a lot of people, and I think the statistics are 77% of all enterprises that we surveyed would acknowledge after the fact that they're hybrid, meaning either they're using multiple public clouds or public and private or public and on-premise, or usually actually in the vast majority it's actually at least 2 public and some private and on-premise, and now edge is going to come. Now, the question you got to ask is, did they arrive there or were they intentional? And I think that the change that is there upon us is we need to make it intentional as opposed to they arrived there. Now they arrive there and then they say, well, for some things I need to get more prescriptive about the architecture I use. And that's, I think, part of the reason, to quote VMware, VMware has success in telling people, look, I can take you to public cloud and I can keep you on-premise, but you can use the same application in both places. That's an advantage for the clients. Now, how do you connect the two environments? How do you make sure things flow seamlessly? Can you manage both the same way? Those are all things that we can do. We certainly do it with OpenShift. VMware does it with the VMware set of products. By the way, the two also work together. One rides on the other in those environments. But I think that there is an opportunity for us to walk in and tell people intentionally, if that's the environment, this is how you should monitor it. This is how you should secure it. This is how you decide what goes where. And those are all big opportunities, I think, for all of us as we go down this path, but to make it more intentional than accidental.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Well, I just got the note that we are out of time, so thank you, Arvind, for the opportunity to have this fireside chat with you. Really appreciate the time.